I would like to welcome my dear friend, Michael Bunting. So, Michael, for those who don't know him, he's a best-selling author in Australia. The book has made its way around the world. The Mindful Leader. I had the pleasure of co-writing a book with him called Vertical Growth, on which we had our last EEE with Michael quite a few months ago. And we'll be sharing that with participants who want to look into that. And more recently, he's had a chance to develop, well, over the last couple of years, he had developed an incredible leadership program that Lucienne and I and Jackie have a chance to be delivering. And that just has been evolving at a really rapid pace. I'm always impressed by Michael's brilliance and ability to just take topics and bring them so quickly, so far ahead. And that has brought even a company name change to TripleGoal. So I'm saying that because I think that's a good segue to introduce Michael and maybe allow you, Michael, to pick up to explain why did you even change the name from where you were before to TripleGoal and how that's impacting our conversation today. So for those who are joining us, the conversation is about a really powerful assessment that Michael's put together that backs up the vertical growth book and program. So it'd be great to hear the story, Michael. Why are we now called TripleGoal, and lead into how that has led to this amazing assessment that we've been using?
Thank you, Carl. Good morning, everybody. It's 10:34 in Sydney on a Friday night. You guys are my party. This is the Friday night party for me. Um, so, I think the simplest way to explain this, and probably you'll all connect with this, is about 6 years ago, we were working on the premise that if you improved workplace engagement, that was the best you could do in the field of culture and coaching. And then some data started coming out that was showing that 25% of the most engaged people in the average organization are the least productive. And the idea that engagement definitely drives performance is actually questionable. And over time, we've come to understand this even more. We even now have nicknames for companies that have high engagement and low performance. We call those companies the decaying country club because people love being around and they're nice, but they're not actually performing. And I'd say the last 5 clients we've taken on in Australia are all decaying country clubs, interestingly enough. That's where they find themselves. And then companies that have high performance but low engagement, we call those the golden torture chamber. And the golden torture chamber is more old-fashioned nowadays as a company than the decaying country club. I think with all the political correctness, the politeness that we are in nowadays, it's more easy to come across these nice workplaces that are not high performing. About 5 or 6 years ago, we had someone challenge us and say, your work is not connected enough to performance outcomes, to profit, to money, to if it's in a for-profit business. And it's interesting because I think the holy grail for our industry is connecting behavior to performance outcomes, to dollar outcomes. And that was the big breakthrough that Carl and Lucienne achieved with Sanofi in Canada, where when we reinvented everything, we had the first evidence that if you change behavior successfully, you can directly lead to higher profitability. In our industry, that is the holy grail. I don't think there's anything higher as an achievement in our industry, that you can work with a person at a behavior level and their organization ends up being more successful because of that behavior, not because they love the coaching or because they like the assessment. They actually change the performance of the business.
Michael, can I
And
just kick
then,
in very quickly,
yeah,
just on this one, because you're talking about performance. Correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of these companies, indeed, shareholder value and profits important, but aren't we talking about just performance in a broader sense as well, depending on how the company
yeah,
defines performance? Would that be worth giving some
that's
nuances on
correct.
that?
I'll come to that.
Okay.
Maybe you speed me along here, Carl. So we eventually realized that we had got some very interesting data. I'll tell you about the data is interesting too. We eventually realized that when we're thinking about the outcomes of what our clients are trying to achieve, they are trying to achieve three things. They're not just trying to improve workplace engagement or create a great workplace. Although that's crucial, they're also trying to improve financial performance if they're a for-profit business, or their outcomes if they're a not-for-profit, or their charity levels or their NPS scores. And they're also trying to consistently innovate. And we came to call that the triple goal. The triple goal is high performance, high pace of learning, and an excellent workplace. We've come to coin it great workplace, great performance, and great learning. What we found is so fascinating, and I'll just share an image with you. And I'll talk about what Carl's question was on performance, because the first research we did was on performance, but we didn't take company performance because we were assessing individual leaders. What you're seeing on screen there is the assessment, the red and green in the circle of the assessment, and the triple goal you're seeing above it, because we actually measure the triple goal in our assessments. The triple goal is the most agreed upon leadership theory we've ever had in our 25 years of work. So if you Google Amazon, if you go into Amazon and you look at the topic leadership, you'll get over 60,000 books on leadership. There's a huge range of opinions and views on what leadership is. Most of them converge, but what we're most interested in is not what leadership is what leadership produces. How do I know? Like if you were in a football game and you went, how do I know that team's good? It's because they win. So how do I know that leader's good? Well, they get great. Their team is high performing, high learning, and happy. That's how I know that leader's good. And only after that do we look at the behavior of the leader. And we've come to learn to ask the relentless so what question. If a client says, oh, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to change this behavior, or I'm going to listen more, we now relentlessly say, so what? So what? Explain how that's going to improve performance. How's that going to improve agility and learning and happiness in your team? If you can't explain the so what, your behavior changes are irrelevant. It doesn't matter. And the same applies for coaching and for assessments. When we did the original research, we had 277 leaders. We were given all their confidential performance ratings by their organizations, large, big multinational organizations. And we assessed all 277 leaders, and we tracked the connection between performance outcomes, how they actually rated on their annual review in their company, and it tracked at a 50% ratio on the red and a negative 45 a 50% on the green and a negative 45 correlation on the red. What that means is for every 10% you get better at green zone behavior, which is the 7 leadership practices we measure, your performance rating increased 5%. It's a 50% ratio. It's commonly accepted that ratio is 50% competence and 50% behavior. And we think we pretty much nailed measuring the behavior aspect of leadership.
Would you mind explaining? Many people here don't quite understand what you're saying when you talk about green and red, and that could lead us, just a quick overview as why this assessment is maybe different than other ones you've seen and that are out there on the market.
So the history of this assessment comes off Kouzes and Posner's work. My first book I wrote was with Kouzes and Posner, Leadership Challenge, arguably the most researched leadership model on earth. 5 million people on their database, 700 master's and doctoral theses written on it. And they have 5 key leadership practices, and we added 2 because we do such deep transformational work in our area. And we added accountability, which they don't have, and we had self-regulation. The middle of our circle is self-regulation. We've come to describe self-awareness as self-regulation. Why? Because so many people are self-aware without the ability to self-regulate. I might have the capacity to know, I can be angry at times, but what I care about is, can you regulate that anger? Can you actually manage it in real time? And that's the work of deep mindfulness practices and regulation practices. The red zone, we began to measure what we call the dysfunctional behaviors in organizations. We would ask them to list, this is several years ago, to list what are the behaviors that are getting in your way. And people will say things like politics, we're perfectionistic with our slide decks, we have too many people at meetings. You'd have all these classic things that are happening in organizations that are hurting them. And we began to compile this list over the years. And eventually we formulated it into proper theory, stress theory. So fight, flight, freeze, and fawn behaviors. And we used Karen Horney's work and we used the Enneagram work, and we ended up formulating 13 red zone behaviors. Those negatively correlate to the performance outcomes. We've done quite rigorous research on this, meaning that if you are in the red zone, and you can see the images there, the more you go into it, the worse your outcomes get. Because what we've realized is organizations do not care about behavior. This is a radical thing to say. They care about the outcomes. That's all that matters. And until you can frame behavior in outcomes, then you're kind of talking HR language and you're not talking the business's language. And that's a big problem in organizations when you want to get traction at scale. What we found is that using the simple language of red and green creates an unbelievable stickiness and memory in organizations. We go and do a 3-hour presentation to a client, and we'll go back there 3 months later, and they'll say things like, "Oh, I was in the red zone today." And like, wow, it's so easy to remember red, green, red, green. Green is good, red is bad. And then what they begin to understand is red's a little bit more nuanced. I'm not going to go into it's such a beautiful body of work because we also teach people how to be deeply compassionate with the red zone, but also fiercely accountable around the red zone. We teach
And
people how to
maybe
cultivate the green.
quick parentheses, Michael, for the listeners. That was the first EEE. That this translates into a leadership development program where we're helping them to move towards the green, obviously,
Yeah.
and better accept the red, which is out of acceptance commitment trainings.
Thanks, Carl. It is worth saying what you'll notice on the image you're seeing in front of you is that the red zones, it's not up and if you know the leadership circle, for example, you'll know it's above the line and below the line. You've got the good behaviors on the top and the bad behaviors on the bottom of the circle. Or if the LSI, they're kind of a mix. What you'll see in our image is it's left and right. And the reason why it's left and right is because we translate that very quickly into the underlying drivers behind. And what you've got to do, we end up with a matrix structure. I don't have it on this particular slide, where we go, okay, what's the red, what's the green, but what are the drivers behind the red and what are the drivers behind the green? And that's the elegance of our matrix developmental structure. It works so seamlessly where you go, okay, I now understand what the red and green is, but I need to understand the immunity to change, the distress tolerance underneath, the organizational systems, the organizational belief systems that are driving those red zone behaviors. We teach this at Sydney University's MBA program. And one of the assignments the students have to do is they have to go and identify the red zones in their organization, and they have to explain why they're there. And the why is really interesting, which is a systems issue. It's a role modeling issue. It's beliefs. It's common reward systems and so forth. The structure of this allows us very easy translation from the seen into the deep driving unseen world in a seamless way. That's why it's left and right. Now, I think Carl's said he's right. He's suggesting me to take the AI side of it. So one of the things we've seen, actually, let me just pause there, and then I'll just talk to you guys for a second. One of the things we've seen over the years is the struggle between assessing and developing, or the disconnection between assessing and developing. Again, it's the so what question. If you're assessing people, so what? The so what must be shift of behavior, which must move the dial on the outcomes. I think anything else is a failure, in my view. If you're gonna work with us, I'm gonna assess you, help you understand your red, green, help you understand your drivers, your deepest fears, your deepest beliefs underneath driving those reds, help you understand your talk that you need to walk, your deep values that will drive the kind of behaviors you need to pull yourself out of the red zone. But that process is quite complex. And it can be quite inaccessible unless you've got really deep experience as a coach. So particularly the last 3 months, but the last 6 months, we've been working very hard on an AI support structure for this to make it much more seamless. And we've got a 5-phase AI approach to this, right? The first is the interpretation of a report. These kinds of assessment, any decent assessment report is complicated to say the least. And ours, yes, we've got simple, elegant images, but how do you translate that into a proper review development in prose that makes sense? So the first thing we've been doing is training our AI to read reports. That has been a very rigorous process. To give you a sense, it's a 30-page prompt, 30-page prompt, right? With layered reasoning in it, so that you as the coach or the client can click one button and say, help me read this report and make sense of it in normal language. That's step one. Then you can inquire about it. Oh, I don't understand this report. I don't understand that part of the report. What this does is it reduces there's a bigger thing around here. We want to reduce bad used time on coaches that expensive used time as well. So if you're a coach, we don't think it's well used time to sit there interpreting a report for a client. We never have thought that. We think your time is much better used on holding clients accountable for their practice, helping them inquire into why they're not practicing or inquiring where they're getting stuck. That's much more useful coaching time. So the faster we can help you get them to a development practice and help them be autonomous in question, that's step one we've faced. And I'll share with you what we're doing. The second thing is that when they are doing their development plan, we want them to be able to ask questions on what does this mean and how does that work? Because we take them through a pretty sophisticated development plan. It's all online, the whole thing. And then we move into, I'm looking at point two now, looking at, I'm just going to skip to point four. What we now do as well is we have a fortnightly, it's either every 2 weeks, 4 weeks, or 6 weeks, people now get rated. So whichever statements they rated worst on, for example, in the green or the red, they can add those and create a pulse survey so they can get their stakeholders to rate them every 2 weeks on those select 4 or 5 statements, which creates accountability. When we do when we do cohorts, the whole cohort goes onto a leaderboard. So once they've got their commitment and they're actually practicing, they get scored every 2 weeks by their stakeholders, but they go onto a collective leaderboard, literally, which creates transparent accountability for practice. Because again, it doesn't matter if your assessment's amazing, but it doesn't translate into disciplined practice that moves the dial on the outcomes. It's a waste of time. I can't stress this highly enough. And then the last thing that we're developing on AI, which has been, it's really shocked me. I had a client this morning who was like, give me that now. I need that now. And what we're creating is a meeting recorder that knows the person's red and green zone and their development practice. And they can click a meeting recorder for all their meetings with their direct reports or their peers. And that meeting will be recorded. It'll push it back to the development platform. It knows the person's red and green. It will then give them an assessment of how they've gone on falling back into their red zones and how they've gone on developing their green zones. It will then delete the transcript so that it's completely legally safe for everybody to translate that. And that will then compile into a trend data for you as coach or for you as client that you can begin to see what's really happening in your meetings. And are you actually doing the work and are you progressing? And then you can get even collective reports. If you're the CEO of a company and you were to say you had 20 leaders going through that, you could ask, what are the common trends and patterns I'm seeing in meetings? That it takes that and compiles that. That's the kind of use of AI that we think adds incredible value to clients, but also to the coach, where you translate from assessment right through the whole journey into disciplined practice that makes a difference to that organization's outcomes. And you're working at depth level. You're working with a shadow, you're working with people's belief systems, but you're also working at a simple enough level to move the dial on behavior.
I'll just kick in here. What I'm hearing you speak, like there's a lot of emphasis put on accountability in that. I must admit, for me, I'm a psychologist, always trying to be nice and compassionate and all of that stuff. And you brought in accountability. And I must admit, at first, I was like, my God, we're tough here. Like, we're here to support people. What I'd like to share has been my experience on how accountability actually has added so much to the participants' experience. We just got a survey back, and Luciane helped me out on the statistics, but psychological safety for the program, I think, came out at 9.8. Okay, 9.8. And that to me was shocking, quite honestly, because I thought we were being tough on people with, you just mentioned they're being they get the pulse check every couple of weeks, et cetera, from their people, or there's group accountability. I would have thought that would have been the opposite of psychological safety. So do you want to speak to that? How we're able to be both demanding yet very kind and considerate?
Thank you. We have a whole process. We measure what we call toxic tough, healthy tough, and toxic nice and healthy nice in the assessment too. So that, because being sugarcoating feedback is not nice, that's toxic nice. Being emotionally intelligent, empathetic, that's healthy nice. Being aggressive and demanding deadlines aggressively is toxic tough. addressing performance gaps constructively is healthy, tough. Most leaders we work with can't actually tell the difference in their own behavior. So having it mapped is incredibly useful. What we found really, really interesting is we measure leadership effectiveness. All 360 assessments that I've come across and researched, and we've done extensive many, they all measure as their bottom line leadership effectiveness. We also measure leadership effectiveness in our 360. It's typically how you go, are we measuring the right things? Is it moving the dial leadership effectiveness? Most fascinatingly, we found two strange anomalies. When we started measuring the team's performance of the leader's team's performance, what we started seeing consistently in a particular kind of leader is they would get a high leadership effectiveness score, but their team was low performing. Now, that didn't make sense. And that doesn't make sense for assessments in general. And then what we found is that it turns out that leadership effectiveness is more or less a popularity vote. It's not actually a vote on performance. And I think it's tainted leadership assessments globally because they've always been the baseline is leadership effectiveness. But who cares about leadership effectiveness? I want to know, is my team performing well, learning well, and happy? That's the product of great leadership. The other fascinating thing we found is that psych safety, we've at least I understood until about a year ago that if you get high psychological safety, you get high learning environment. That turns out not to be true. So we're consistently seeing people with it's not all the time. We see people with high psych safety and high learning and innovation in their teams. But we also see people with high psych safety, but low learning and innovation. And what's constantly missing when we see these anomalies is low accountability. And what we've begun to discover is that accountability actually sets psych safety and performance together, and it sets psych safety and innovation together. And that when we become too psychologically safe, without honesty, without directness, you end up with a decaying country club performance-wise. It's very reliable. We see it, and it's been quite a learning for us and for our clients. Psych safety can actually be in an organization and not positively changing learning and performance, because it's not about being nice. It's
Only
about
about
being
being nice.
compassionate, honest. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
only about being nice, it's about being compassionate,
Yeah.
accountable, demanding accountability. You can't have excellence without accountability. And to Carl's point, we do spend a tremendous amount of time helping our clients understand that accountability is not being a jerk. That's toxic accountability. It's why we measure healthy accountability and toxic accountability. Because what we found is a lot of leaders who are overly nice and conflict avoidant, they tend to have an unconscious belief that I move to accountability and becoming a jerk. And I know that sounds odd, but many of them struggle there. So showing them the difference, the visual difference between healthy and unhealthy, extremely useful. One of our best clients, when they first saw it took them about a week to process. Because what they had done is in their early career, they'd been a jerk, demanding performance. In their later career, they'd become too kind. And they were so afraid of becoming their younger jerk self, horrible self, that they stayed overly balanced and kind, and performance was suffering. So it's like, how do you do that balance?
If you have any additional questions that you'd like to explore with Michael, the floor is open for questions.
I have a comment.
Thank you, Jackie. Yes.
What I find really intriguing with AI is the meeting and actually being in where you see the leader's behavior live. And from what you've told me, Carl, sometimes AI sees patterns that we don't even see as coaches. So like to me, this is just such a brilliant breakthrough that we can get those kind of detailed, because it's great to say you're going to change behavior, but we're not always conscious that we do. So these AI recorded meetings, to me, it's pointing out to the shadow. It's shining light on the shadow that from in our day-to-day interactions. And I think it's brilliant.
It's been mind-boggling for me to see how AI is it really augmenting our coaching capabilities. It's really blowing me away, and to resist it, I think, is a big, you're going to be left on the sidelines, in my opinion. We've just begun. We know AI is getting increasingly intelligent as the weeks go on. Do you have anything else to add on how you've been impressed by AI, Michael, and how it's changing how you operate?
I've been, like probably many of you, been absolutely buried in the AI world. At least half my day, every day, is on AI now and programming and researching and looking. One thing I'm really clear about is that AI will never replace the coach. I just don't think it can. And I think that if you look at the meta trends, they will say things like AGI is coming, AGI is coming. But if you understand LLM models, it's highly unlikely we'll ever get, not in the least in the next 10, 15 years, will we get AGI, artificial general intelligence. And that there will always be the need for the human at the top, at least for another decade minimum.
It's also
And
shifting, Michael, how we show up, because now it's really adding what is unique from
yeah,
the human in this picture. What are you seeing as
correct.
unique
Yeah.
attributes that we bring to the table?
It's the understanding of the whole person, the whole lives. It's the understanding of the anomalies and the paradoxes that no AI can understand. But what the AI can do is leverage so much insight and structure around you. We think that the average, if you to say if it was a 10 session coaching intervention with a client, it will become a 3 session, not 10. So you'll have less coaching with way better outcomes. What that results in, interestingly enough, it's not a scarcity mentality. It makes coaching available to more people. It makes the
Mm.
coaching much more reliable and the outcomes much more reliable. So for example, we're not scared at all of replacing parts of our own coaching at all. We just think it'll make the client experience that much better, that much more cost effective, and will lead to way more business. But you don't want to be I don't think you want to be you don't want to be that coach or that organization that's not using this, because you're going to end up offering your 10 sessions trying to compete with someone with 3 sessions. That's the problem.
Another layer is what we call in psychology the therapeutic alliance. Studies have shown that 50% of progress in a client is linked to the actual relationship with the
Yeah.
client. So that part AI cannot do the way a human being could do. And I don't know if you know, I might be challenging you, Michael, on going from 10 to 3 sessions. I think we could still have quite a few sessions, but just go a heck of a lot deeper with the clients, because we're holding space. We know behavioral change takes time, and that space needs to be held in time with that therapeutic alliance, lack of better words right now in coaching. Obviously, it's not
Yeah.
therapy, but I don't
The
know.
other thing that the other thing that AI is not good at, Carl, is holding people accountable. It's too nice. Can I just
Until
ask
you
you
program it
answer?
differently. Yeah.
Yeah, can I just answer a couple of questions there? Just on in the chat function, because they are interesting to, are people really themselves when they know they're recorded? We found because we've been recording sessions now, probably about a year now at least, in multiple contexts, in boardrooms, in executive sessions, and people's to put it put it in a cheeky way. They may remember the recording for about 5 minutes, and then they're into the actual topic of the discussion. And if they've got red zone shadow, it plays its way out. It does. It's like we found it's incredibly reliable that they forget very quickly, particularly if the recording is not obtrusive, which is what we try and do. For example, if you use granola on a call, on a web call, you can tell them it's there, but it's not there in the window like Otter or Fireflies, right? You can still record in a way where it's honest and integrity, but and obviously it needs to be responsibly used. But no, we don't find people changing behavior at all. The other question was one's personal approach to leadership and how one conducts their life. Um, there's a complete overlap between the two. One of the things we've seen in our work, or we've researched, is that 40% of an organization's time is chewed up by image management, of people basically pretending to be a different person than they are. But what we have, and that's just such a waste of an organization's time and money, and every organization agrees. So I'm not really answering the question, but it's our experience that we're trying to help the person become congruent in their work and their personal lives. But the expression of healthy behavior is different at work and different at home, of course. That's, it's obvious, but I explained this to a client this morning. I said, love expressed at work is very different to love expressed at home, but it's still both love. Love could be giving a person a chance at doing something that they haven't been given a chance at work. It could be giving someone a hug at home. It's just different expressions of the same thing. What we want to help people do is come to help the healthiest expression of themselves in their personal and their professional lives. What we're typically hired for is to help them with their professional lives.
Has Michael done work with governments or charities?
Not yet. Remember the AI. I should just share with everyone. We did our first attempt at AI about a year ago, completely failed. ChatGPT was not intelligent enough or sophisticated enough to reliably interpret the reports. So we literally failed at the starting gate. And then with the advent of Claude Opus 4.7, we began to understand that a Claude structure was more stable than ChatGPT. And we were able to start interpreting the reports in a consistent way. You have to be pretty exacting with your report interpretation because you're basically dealing with people's lives. It's serious stuff, like it's very vulnerable for them, and it needs to be accurate and reliable. And so we're about to launch just the behavioral assessment. It's in what's called our UAT server. We're using it already, but we haven't released it yet. It's imminent the next week. We'll release what's phase 1. We've got 5 phases to go. It's the tricky thing with AI. It's great to ask it questions about, what's my favorite sport team's record for the last year, or start anything like that. It's ChatGPT or Claude, no difference. But as soon as you wanted to do disciplined process, reliable data work, and not hallucinate and not repeat errors, and then also have what's called layered reasoning, it becomes much trickier. Layered reasoning would be what we've had to train the AI to do is that if it sees a report that's not obvious what the challenge is, that it goes to the next layer of data and looks there. If it's still not obvious, it goes to the next layer, because in the assessment report, there's layers of data. There's you can go here to here to here, you can go deeper and deeper. We've had to train the AI to do that reliably so they can always give a person a reliable interpretation and it's been an incredible process. It's funny, AI is not like a magic tool. You have to train it in your system. Just even for it to help people do their development map, we've used 140 people's development maps. And we had to train it what bad looks like, what good looks like, what contradictory looks like, what it looks like when a person's justifying their red zone as opposed to owning it in their development practice. That's subtle stuff that you have to teach it. It doesn't just instantly know. So it's a long answer, but we haven't got there yet. We're about to launch the first part of the AI properly into the market, probably next week.
Wonderful way, Michael, to maybe just put a wrap on that. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We will be taking a break until September on these EEE sessions. On that note, wishing everybody an amazing Friday and weekend. Hope to see you back in September.